Since the mid-1940s, central banks have provided credit cards to encourage people to spend more. The idea that you could use credit cards to spend to your heart's content sounded very attractive, and this idea is what has influenced consumer debt to become so prevalent over the years to the point where it has completely transformed the consumerism landscape. And one of the ways it has achieved this is through the rise of buy now, pay later apps, including Klarna, Affirm, Afterpay, PayPal, etc. And these buy now, pay later apps have become so incorporated in tech companies like Amazon that it is becoming increasingly difficult to resist these methods of payment. But why have BNPL, short for buy now, pay later apps, become increasingly popular today? In 2026, Forbes reported that one of the appeals to buy now, pay later apps has to do with their lack of high interest rates, unlike credit cards. The idea that you could spend your money on an item and you didn't have to pay the full amount right away is something that really has appealed to the younger generation. So let's say, for example, there's an item that you're interested in buying and it's $1,000, but you can't afford the item right away. You would therefore either make incremental payments weekly or monthly until you're able to cover the full debt through a buy now, pay later app. Sounds like a utopia, right? Well, what if I told you this utopia isn't what it seems? In 2025, the Walrus reported that the total consumer debt in Canada skyrocketed to $2.5 trillion, and one of the top contributors to that were buy now, pay later apps. In fact, in the same year, LendingTree reported that some of the top consumers of BNPLs in the US were Gen Z, and this demographic group are between the ages 18 to 28. For an overview, this video is going to be broken down into 4 parts. In the first part of the video, I'm going to address the origins of buy now, pay later. In the second part, we're going to cover some of the top reasons why people tend to get indebted. In the third part, I'm going to talk about some of the key problems I have with buy now, pay later apps. And finally, to leave the video on a positive note, I am going to talk about potential solutions. Now, before I get to that, hi, my name is Lonimi Maseko, and on this channel, I make self-development and educational content. If that sounds like something you're interested in, I hope you stick around. So what are some of the origins of buy now, pay later? To answer the question, we have to go all the way back to the 2010s, where Afterpay was launched. For a quick context, Afterpay is an Australian tech company that was founded by Nick Molnar and Anthony Eisen in 2014. The business model of the platform allowed consumers to make payment installments spread out across 6 weeks rather than making bulk payments for an item immediately, right? And in 2023, Afterpay reported to having about 24 million users, and given its popularity, its business model ended up being incorporated in countries like Canada, the US, the UK, France, New Zealand, Italy, Spain, etc. So Afterpay ended up providing a foundation for other buy now, pay later apps to launch over the years. And as I was doing research for this video, something that stood out to me about the buy now, pay later industry is that it seems like it is designed to target demographic groups who can't afford anything. Let me explain. So according to the media, Gen Z is a demographic group that struggles to afford a lot of things like homes because of the high cost of living. It's a demographic group that struggles to make stable income. It also struggles to basically afford groceries, and basically the lack of job opportunities because of the high unemployment rate has caused this generation, my generation, to not be able to afford a lot of things. And that's perfect for the buy now, pay later industry, because as long as they can tap into the anxiety of younger generations because they can't afford things and they have kind of like a negative relationship with money, it's a win-win, right? And I believe that this idea, please spin it for now because I'm going to bring it up again later in this video. So why do people tend to get indebted? One of the reasons is going to be controversial, but hear me out. I believe that one of the top reasons why people tend to get indebted in today's society is because of this psychology of wanting to spend money on luxurious products to impress others. Now, hear me out. In the book, The Psychology of Money by the author Morgan Housel, he talks about the psychology behind what causes people to spend the way they do. And one of the points he raises that I find interesting is he argues that a lot of people today would want to spend money on luxurious products like cars, to signal to other people that they're wealthy. They want to basically earn the respect and admiration from other people. So, therefore, it will cause them to overspend or spend beyond their means. And even if the author wasn't specifically talking about buy now, pay later apps, I believe his arguments can be applied in the context of buy now, pay later, which brings me to my next argument, which is the social pressure to spend. Another reason why people today tend to get indebted. So, according to Yahoo Finance in 2025, it was reported that the social pressure to spend today, especially among the younger generation, has to do with the overconsumption of social media. So, when we're on social media apps like Instagram, and all we see all day through doom scrolling is that our friends or acquaintances or people we don't know are going to paradise, are traveling to paradise places, they're purchasing luxurious clothes, they're attending fancy restaurants, they get to go to outings that are expensive. We kind of get this fear of missing out and we start to compare our lives to theirs. And all of a sudden, there's this pressure to uphold an image on social media of ourselves that honestly doesn't exist, right? And I think this is extremely interesting because I remember when I used to be on Instagram, because if you've watched my other videos, you maybe already know that I deleted Instagram a year ago. But I remember when I used to be on Instagram, I knew a couple of friends who literally, as soon as they bought, let's say, an item, like let's say the new iPhone, right? They would instantly go on social media, on Instagram, to show to everybody that they just got the new iPhone. And I remember thinking at the time, wow, so you bought the item not for your own pleasure, for first and foremost, but you're buying it and you're posting it online the minute you bought the item to show to other people that you just got the latest edition of a phone. I mean, these are people that I suspect the majority didn't care about this person and vice versa. But however, social media apps like Instagram enables us to share the things we possess, our material possessions, and it creates this kind of superficiality and virtual reality that just does not exist, right? Another reason why I believe a lot of people tend to get indebted is because of the high cost of living. So, according to LendingTree in 2025 reported that one of the top reasons why buy now pay later users they would spend their money would be because of the high cost of living, and therefore they would take loans to be able to buy groceries, right? And this is understandable. Today, the inflation is extremely high, which has caused the price of food in supermarkets to rise. And therefore, a lot of people just can't afford to buy groceries because everything has gotten so expensive nowadays, right? Now, to encapsulate some of the arguments I've been trying to make here, we're going to look at a study that was conducted by LendingTree in April of 2025, where they conducted a survey. And in this study, they surveyed about 980 BNPL consumers in the United States. But quick disclaimer, I want to highlight that the participants that were surveyed are not meant to be a total representation of the United States. However, it gives us an idea of what BNPL users tend to spend their money on, right? So the results showed that 41% of BNPL users, They take loans to spend their money on clothing, accessories, shoes. 39% of BNPL users, they take loans to spend their money on technological devices like laptops or gaming. 33% of BNPL users take loans to spend their money on items like furniture, home decor. And finally, 25% of BNPL users spend their money on groceries. I found this very interesting because it really allows us to narrow down exactly why are people spending their money, especially through BNPL and accruing so much debt. Now, if you're watching this video, I want to specifically highlight that my goal isn't to judge the way you spend your money. Heck, if let's say you're watching this video and you can afford a lot of the things that you're buying, oh my gosh, have at it. Buy whatever you want, whether it's a luxurious clothes or home or technological devices. Have at it. If you can afford it, have at it. But I think the reason why I'm trying to break down these studies here is because I want us to think about why exactly people tend to spend their money. Is it on things that are absolutely necessary, or is it because it is people tend to spend their money through BNPL apps on things that honestly don't matter in the long term, and therefore they're accruing debt over and over again, and it's like a vicious cycle. Now we're going to explore what are some of the key problems of using buy now pay later apps. Prior to the fall of 2025, if let's say you used a buy now pay later app to make a purchase, if you ended up making late installment payments, this didn't really affect your credit score. However, in the fall of 2025, 𝐓𝐈𝐌𝐄𝐒, which is short for the 𝐓𝐈𝐌𝐿 Corporation, which is an American data analytics company, introduced two new credit scoring models where they would incorporate buy now, pay later loan data into credit scores for the first time. And this changed everything. So that means that the benefit to that is that if let's say you use buy now, pay later and you make your payments on time, then it increases your credit score. But the disadvantage of this is that if you miss your payments deadlines, it is going to significantly affect your credit score. And the problem I have with this is that it creates this vicious cycle of paying debt more and more. For me, I feel like on top of the fact that you have a credit score debt, do you really want to add more pressure by also thinking about a buy now pay later debt that you have to pay? I think that the average or studies show that the average credit card holder has to pay debt, right? So if let's say you are thinking about debt that you have to pay on your credit card, the fact that you also have to think about buy now pay later debts, it just adds so much stress onto you that you don't need. Let's say your argument is that, okay, Lonimi, I get that, but I don't have a credit card. I just only rely on buy now pay later to make purchases. My argument would be fair enough. That removes a lot of weight off your shoulders. However, the argument still stands that you're still having to pay debt for an item that you don't own, right? And that still creates stress all on its own, right? Especially if let's say these are items that are very very expensive, right? And you'd never own these items. You're just constantly having to make incremental payments every week or every month. It's just creating this cycle of always having to pay debt, right? Another problem I have with the buy now pay later apps is that it really causes people to take this identity of the chronic debt payer. Hear me out. When you're constantly thinking about the fact that you have to pay debt and you are just constantly thinking about it, to me, you're feeding your mind the idea that this is your reality and it's not going to change, right? To me, the mind is a very powerful thing. What we feed our mind ends up influencing our daily actions and our life trajectory. So if you're constantly thinking about the fact that you have debt to pay, and let's say one of your goal in life is to become wealthy, well, what your daily actions are going to be influenced by are your predominant thoughts. Are you thinking about wealth and how you can grow wealth? Are you taking actions to build wealth? Or are you constantly thinking about how you have to pay debt? Well, the predominant thoughts in your mind are going to affect your actions on a daily basis, right? So that's why for me, I have a big problem with buy now, pay later apps. And also, by the way, I'm not a fan of credit cards either, right? And I think I'll just completely make a separate video for that because I believe it also causes people to be indebted unnecessarily. But yeah, for the topic of this video, I'm going to focus on buy now, pay later. But yeah, like when you're constantly having to pay debts, you're just taking this role of the chronic debt payer. Another problem I have with buy now, pay later is the fact that it creates this illusion that you can afford to pay something when it's not the case, right? I go by the principle of if you can't afford it, don't buy it. And I can't stress enough how this has really significantly disciplined me over the years to really control my spending habits and not spend on things I can't afford. Granted, I'm not perfect. I've made many spending like mistakes, especially when I was younger. I used to spend my money on things like shoes. I was a big fan of Nike shoes, so I would spend so much money on that, money that I didn't really have, right? But as I over the years, like I started to have a better understanding of how like these companies like buy now pay later industries or credit card industries, they really prey on people that can afford to buy things, and they prey on people's imaginations, right? The fact that you know you can't afford an item, but you are imagining a version of yourself that can because you desire it so much. So therefore, you want to you tap into your emotions and you spend your money to acquire that item. I mean, it just creates this vicious cycle of becoming more and more indebted. It gives you the illusion that you can afford to buy something, whereas you can't. So, what are some solutions you can start adopting today to escape the debt trap, especially if you're a buy now, pay later user? The first tip that I can provide is to create a spending tracker. And what a spending tracker does is it helps you to really hold yourself accountable on what you're spending your money on. You can create a spending tracker on Excel or Google Sheets. And a YouTuber I highly recommend to watch to really help you, create one for yourself is the YouTuber called Diana Marie. I remember back in the day when I would be spending money a lot on things that I didn't need, doing the spending trackers based on the template she did really helped me to see how I was spending my money unnecessarily on things like Uber Eats. I noticed that by the end of each month, when I would be doing my spending tracker, I noticed that a huge percentage of my money would go towards food delivery on Uber Eats. And at the end of the month, I would be spending about close to $300 on Uber Eats, which really helped me to understand that I needed to cut my spending on food delivery, especially if I wanted to save more money and use that money to doing other things. Another tip that I want to provide is to honestly try to pay off your credit card debt or your buy now pay later debt. And I know this is something you probably hear a lot, but I believe that life is meant to be lived in freedom. And the thing is, when we constantly try to buy things we can't afford, we're just spending life without having freedom. It's like we're constantly thinking about the fact that we have debt to pay, and that doesn't really put us in an abundance mindset, right? So I think really taking the time to pay off the debt you have so that you can build a prosperous life for yourself in the future is something I highly recommend so you can just get one step closer to your freedom. The third solution that I can provide is to take this new identity of a wealth builder or investor. And this circles back to what I was saying earlier about the identity we take when we become chronic debt payers by constantly paying debt through the buy now, pay later apps or credit card, right? So when you are assuming this new role of a wealth builder or investor, it can look like taking daily actions every day to become that person, which is the wealth builder or investor. And that can look like setting aside money every day to invest in the stock market. And you can create a tax-free savings account if you're in Canada watching this. And through your tax-free savings account, you invest in things like index funds, exchange traded funds. And as time goes on, the more you make investment, the more you compound your wealth and you get a higher return of investment. Or if, let's say, you're from the USA watching this, right? It can also look like maybe opening a Roth IRA account where you can make investments there. So when you take daily actions every single day towards building a prosperous life for yourself, it's significantly going to change your relationship with money, and you're going to assume a new identity, right? I can't stress enough how ever since I started investing last year, because I'm a baby investor, I'm not an expert. And I also started reading more books about financial literacy, like the book I was reading earlier on the psychology of money. It's really significantly helped me change the negative relationship I used to have with money. Doing this little daily actions, as time goes on, they compound and they shift your life trajectory towards the person you want to become. The final tip that I can give is to honestly reduce the amount of time you spend on social media apps like Instagram. So, circling back to what I was saying about the social pressure to spend, if you know that going on Instagram, doom scrolling on Instagram, seeing what other people are doing, heavily affects your spending habits and influences your spending habits to spend money on things you can afford, then my advice is to just reduce the amount of time you're on social media apps. Or better yet, do like me, like I did a year ago, if that's something you're interested in, and remove Instagram completely if that's going to give you peace of mind. And I also am going to leave a link up to give you more of a in-depth explanation as to why I deleted Instagram a year ago. And if that's something you're interested in, you're free to click on the link above. But yeah, like I remember when I was on Instagram, psychologically, it caused me to compare myself to other people. And I had this pressure to perform. And if removing Instagram is going to help you significantly take ownership of your spending habits, then go have at it. I want you to know you're not alone. If you've made it to the end of this video, I'm so glad you did. So, one of the reasons why I made this video is because I want us as Gen Zers to thrive economically and be successful. And I'm tired of seeing in the media this narrative that Gen Z is a generation that is destined to fail because it's a generation that can't afford to buy a lot of things. And while I'm not saying that it's not true that a lot of Gen Zers are struggling to afford things, what I notice is that the more you read about something online, the more you believe it to be true and the more you attach an identity to what people are saying about you or your generation. And I don't want that. I want us to reject this narrative. I feel like a lot of these studies that are trying to evaluate the relationship between Gen Z and the economy, or the relationship between Gen Z and money, in these studies, while they like to identify problems, a lot of the times they don't really provide solutions to the problems. And I think that if we want to really start to change our relationship with money on a positive light, we need to significantly get to the root cause of why a lot of people rely on buy now, pay later apps to make purchases. What's the root cause, right? And by addressing the root cause, we're one step closer to finding potential solutions to the problem. I also want us to take back full ownership of our spending habits. And that can look like making our own decisions rather than letting companies dictate how we should spend our money. So, if you're a buy now, pay later user, I'd like to hear your thoughts. Did you agree with some of the things I said, or did you not agree with some of the things I said? I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Again, thank you so much for watching. I'm so grateful. And I'll see you in the next one. Bye.